So basically, I reviewed your questions about user stories and stuff which you put on the Slack for me. There is a few concerns considering all of that. First, when we were solo on Skype, I explained that there are several of the areas which can be sprinted, right, separately, and later on sprinted as an integral part of those two. So all this, your concern with lagging, for example, which you question, right, of the implementing the system on the server side, which will predict movement of the player, for example.
Correct.
So this is as well something which is externally done. Currently, we don't have possibilities to do such stuff.
Okay.
So what would maybe be good is for the Scrum Master to place it in the development plan as the external Scrum sprint, which will need to be done.
Okay.
As well, let's say some iteration on the sprints which are already finished, but on the different base technology, if you understand me what I'm trying to explain. Because the base technology between this what you wanted and this what you have now, it will not be compatible in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe this is something which we should implement. So this is most likely the Scrum Master job to place all of this information, because this is just like information between two different bases on top of which we will build our gameplay right in the future. So for now we have this one, and for example, when for now maybe our programmer is sprint, we will update our Scrum Master, right, with the task which he has done.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we should have this overall plan. So as I understood what Scrum is, right? So you sprint, you update what you have done. Scrum Master will note that and see what everyone done and how much from the final product this is actually, right? From the polished product. This is the question for the Santhosh, right?
Yeah, that's right. So before that, I just want to tell you one thing is we have not started sprint year, so we have to start the sprints. Before that, we have to complete all these things. The product backlog has to be ready. And what you have said, what we can do is we can take it as risk items. If there are any risk items for the planning sessions, so we'll take it up and we'll put a flag on that. And then we'll see that. We'll take it as a daily item to discuss and how we are progressing on that. As you all know, we are still in the training sessions for now about this process. As soon as we finish this, I and Robert are going to work on the product backlog. And when that is done, we are going to project that for you guys so that we all can work together and have a planning sessions all together. We'll have to set up that probably next week. For this week, we are going to have these sessions.
I've got a bit of news here. So I already had one meeting with Zoran. And what this boils down to is that our product backlog number 1, we are going to consider complete because we already have that done in prototype code. So we can actually start from backlog number 2. And what Zoran's talking about is once we have the funding, I mean, that's really the big thing here. We need to have a budget to do what we're talking about. Then we can go back to product backlog number 1 and replan and rebuild our code from scratch properly.
Yeah, maybe not entirely. So this is why I mentioned this, because some sprinting will not be useless. So some of the things which are produced can be used. Yeah. Maybe not most of them.
And I like the sense we're not starting over again and doing everything we've already done, right? We'll get to that, but for right now, this team can just jump in from where we are at, which is cool. We're going to basically keep prototyping and doing the vertical slice. The moment we have a budget, then we can go back to the planning stage and rebuild things that need to be done.
Okay. So we can plan that in the sprint planning meeting.
These are really important things. But now we know we've got answers. So that's what I was looking for.
We are going to pile up our tech debt items, which we need to complete. So we keep on piling up.
Yeah.
Brought this up. So we'll figure out this in the planning sessions and then we'll go ahead from there.
It's just good news because we don't have to start with item number 1, which was planning out our code. Because we don't have a big programming team, so now all of a sudden everybody's going to be waiting for programming. So this is kind of good news. In the long term, it's not the best news, but in the short term, it's excellent.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for bringing it up anyway.
Yeah. It's all worked out, so now we know. But I needed those answers, so we've got them now.
Yeah. So before I start this thing from here, so I just wanted to summarize what we have discussed yesterday. So Scrum is nothing but it's an incremental model. What do you mean by incremental model is for every sprint, we keep on delivering some chunk of work, every user story or couple of user stories. So every individual will be delivering that by end of the sprint. So we all integrate that all these user stories to the existing product or existing game, and then that becomes an incremental model. So we keep doing that, and Scrum is nothing but iterative, and it's a lightweight framework. Okay, so that is the simple definition that I want to say. And in Scrum, we have three roles, that is product owner, Scrum Master, and the development team. The product owner responsibilities. So he's solely responsible for the product backlog. So the team can give him suggestions or advices or make some changes in the priorities or in the product backlog. And however, he is the only person who will be accountable for the product backlog items. Okay, so that's about product owner. And the Scrum Master is going to monitor the process, help out the team members in any issues. Like, Zach Zorn brought this up, so we'll be noting down and try to bring that up in our planning sessions. So also monitoring the sprint progress, how we are progressing towards our sprint goals. It's a Scrum Master responsibility to make sure we are ideally following that plan. The development team, the responsibilities are coordinating with the product owner, intimating Scrum Master for any impediments or any blocking sessions. If any for the product backlog items changes, if you want to negotiate anything with the product owner, so you have to bring that up to the Scrum Master first, and then we will have to negotiate all together with the product owner. So that is the development team. These are the major responsibilities that you guys need to remember. And there are Scrum values, 5 Scrum values, which we have discussed yesterday. It's
commitment, courage, focus, openness,
respect.
respect.
So these are the Scrum values that we have to remember when we are following this process. Without this, we cannot embody from Scrum 3 pillars that we already discussed about: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. These are the 3 pillars of the Scrum process. So being very transparent and inspecting ourselves in our sprint progress and adapting the improvements of whatever we are inspecting. These are the 3 pillars that we need to embody with all the Scrum values. Starting from here, this is one of the daily Scrum event, which is nothing but daily Scrum we have discussed. So we have a channel on the Slack that you guys need to join, and please join that channel. And this is nothing but daily Scrum is all about, answering 3 questions. The development team will answer those questions in the yellow highlighted items. What did you do yesterday? That's the first question that you need to answer. And the second one is, what will you do today to help the development team meet the sprint goal? That's the second. And do you see any impediment that is preventing the development team from meeting the sprint goal? So these are the 3 questions that you need to answer in that daily Scrum. Again, time boxed event, so which is at 15 minutes. Since we are all in different time zones, so since most of them were saying that you guys are unable to meet on the phone call, so it's better to update on the Slack every day whenever you log in. So just update that to entire team. It's not only that. It's not that you're reporting to Scrum Master or to the product owner. It's that you're sharing your work, what you have done, with the entire team. Talking about team progress here, not individual progress. So always remember that Scrum is all about the team progress. Okay. So whenever we talk about sprint goal, it's a team goal. It's not individual goal. Daily Scrum is nothing but, when we'll be meeting every day for 15 minutes to have some discussions about these 3 questions. If there are any impediments, we'll try to resolve that after the daily Scrum. If there are any impediments or no blocking sessions, we are good to go and we are going to start our work again. It's a daily routine that we need to do this. So just a heads up and just a request as well. Let's try to follow this process on the tool for now, since I have created this channel. So please try to update your, whatever you're doing every day. Try to share that work with your team members. So let's practice in that way for now. Okay, going forward, we'll try to have something else like a call or video call or whatever. So we can have that in the future. The Scrum Master teaches the development team to keep the daily Scrum within time box, that is 15 minutes. And the daily Scrum is an internal meeting for the development team. So no external people will be coming over, like stakeholders, for example. Stakeholders like, it can be investors or external stakeholders, somebody who is not interested in the project, but he wants to listen. So those people are not, encouraged to attend this meeting. So this is completely a time box. So only the participants will be product owner, scrum master, and the development team. That's all. No managers, no project managers, no senior managers, no one. It's just an internal team meeting. So if others are present, the scrum master ensures that they do not disrupt the meetings. They can be passive in the meeting. So rather than being active, they should be only listening rather than talking. It should not go beyond 15 minutes. That's the first criteria here. And it should not disrupt the development team because they might be bringing up something else that they did not like. So they cannot talk that in that meeting. Daily scrums improves communication, eliminate other meetings, identify impediments to development for removal, highlight and promote quick decision making, and improve the development team's level of knowledge. Again, we talk about those three pillars that is again inspecting and adapting ourselves in this meeting. Like if you have anything that you want to share, you can share that in the daily scrum meeting. So about the technologies, about whatever, but it's not about something out of the box. Whatever we have in the sprint, we are going to discuss that. So sprint review is another meeting. This is another scrum event. Sprint review is one of the art meeting which you guys are doing. So you guys are already doing this. A sprint review is held at the end of the sprint. That's a good thing that you guys are practicing that. The same practice we are going to do. It's again inspecting the increment and adapting the product backlog if needed. So you demo your work, whatever you do. You demo that to the product owner. The product owner likes it. He'll accept those stories. If he doesn't like it, he'll reject the stories with comments on that, where you guys need to improve and where you guys need to change. That is where your product owner will be commenting on your work.
Is this every second Friday now, though?
Yeah, since you guys are already doing this as an art meeting,
Yeah.
so we call it as a sprint review meeting.
I know, but
Guys,
we're doing it every week. So this is every second week at the end of the sprint.
Yes, that's right. Which is 10th business day of the sprint.
Right.
Yeah. Let's say, for example, if we start next Monday as a sprint one and the day one of the sprint, so the day 10 will be the following week of the Friday.
Okay.
So that's how it will be, sprint review. So during the sprint review, the Scrum team and the stakeholders collaborate about what was done. So in this meeting, all the stakeholders can be present. As I said earlier, in the daily Scrum, the stakeholders will not be necessary for that meeting. For this meeting, they can come and sit in the room and see what you guys have demoed. And then they'll try to give you some suggestions or comments. So the product owner will be responsible for that, to take those comments. And then if that was not covered in the story, so product owner will be writing that as a new story for the next sprint. The stakeholders will be giving some suggestions there. And based on that and any changes on the product backlog during the sprint, attendees collaborate on the next things that could be done to optimize value. Third point is completely for the product owner and the team. Of course, you can share some your knowledge, or you can give some advices there for the product owner to write the story. So this is an informal meeting, not a status meeting, and the presentation of the increment is intended to elicit feedback and foster collaborations. So its sprint review is to get the feedback from the stakeholders or get the feedback from the product owner. This is where we do the sprint review. 4-hour meeting for 1 month sprint, since we'll be doing 2-week sprints, so which will be doing 2 hours for one sprint. So it's going to be 2 hours. Based on your work, if you are getting done earlier, then that's fine. If you're not getting done, we will have to time box that event. Sprint review includes elements here. Attendees include the Scrum team and key stakeholders invited by the product owner. The product owner explains what product backlog items have been done and what has not been done. So the product owner is going to show the backlog, that what the team is working on, to the stakeholders, if there are any stakeholders attending the meeting. And based on that, you guys will be demoing that. Done is nothing but when you guys develop something or design something that has to get tested in positive and negative scenarios, and then that you're going to call it as done when it is okay to demo. So that's called as done. Development team discusses what went well during the sprint, what problem it ran into, and how those problems were solved. So these things, generally we'll discuss in the sprint review. The team demonstrates the work that it has done and answers questions about the increment. All the questions from the stakeholders that you guys will be answering those. So whatever you have done. The same thing which you'll be doing in that session, that Robert will be asking some questions. He'll be giving some suggestions, right? The same way in the sprint review, whatever you do, that's the same thing. The stakeholders will be asking questions. The product owner discusses the product backlog as it stands. He or she projects likely target and delivery dates based on progress to date. So whenever these things get done, the product owner will be giving the dates that when we can go for deployment or when we go for the release. So based on that, we'll have to get ready for those release dates. Scrum Master will also be coordinating with the product owner to define the release dates when we can go for that. The entire group collaborates on what to do next so that the sprint review provides valuable input to subsequent sprint planning. So whatever we get done in the current sprint, if product owner is accepting all the stories, then that is fine. If he is not accepting the certain stories, so what happens is that goes into the next sprint. So that gives some idea, some layover for the next sprint, what we have to do. Review of how the marketplace or potential use of the product might have changed. What is the most valuable thing to do next? So based on the market value, the product owner will be deciding what to go next. We talk about here the timeline, budget, and capabilities, and again the market value for the next release. The result of the sprint review is a revised product backlog that defines probable product backlog items for the next. Whatever something gets done, and if it is accepted by the product owner, then that is fine. If it not accepted, then so that will be a layover again. The product backlog may also be adjusted overall to meet new opportunities. That's about sprint review. So this is something about sprint retrospective. So this is last event we'll be doing in Scrum. Again, there are 4 Scrum events. First one is daily stand-up, daily Scrum meeting. Second one is sprint planning. Third one is sprint review. And the fourth one is sprint retrospective. So these are the 4 events that we'll be doing in the Scrum. And the retrospective is an opportunity for the Scrum team to inspect itself and create a plan for improvements to be enacted during the next sprint. So it's all about inspecting and adapting. So this session is inspecting our sprints, that how did we do? Did we lag somewhere? Or did we miss something else? Or if we did not complete the stories, why did we not complete the story? So what was something lacking there? This is, we discussed in this session in the sprint retrospective, and we'll try to get those improvements. Okay. So for every problem, there is a solution. So we'll try to think of that as a team. We'll do some collaboration there and try to get those improvements, and we'll try to implement those improvements in the next sprint, which means that we are not repeating the same mistakes which we have done in the previous sprints. Okay, that is where we'll be adapting those improvements. Second one is the sprint retrospective occurs after the sprint review and prior to the sprint planning. So this is where the sprint review, we are going to do sprint retrospective and before the sprint planning. This is a 3-hour meeting for 1 month sprint. For the 2 sprints, we'll be doing 1.5 hour. 1.5 hour, 1.5 hour. The Scrum Master participates as a P team member here in the meeting from the accountability over the Scrum process. The Scrum Master will be taking out the notes from that meeting and we'll be implementing the improvement items, making sure that that team is following all those improvement items and adapting to that. So the main purpose of the sprint retrospective is inspect how the last sprint went with regards to people, relationships, process, and tools. Identify and order the major items that went well and potential improvements. And the last one is create a plan for implementing improvements to the way the Scrum team does it work. It's all about inspecting and adapting. Okay, that's something about sprint retrospective. The Scrum Master encourages the Scrum team to improve within the Scrum process framework, its development process and practices to make it more effective and enjoyable for the next sprint. And these are the Scrum Master roles that, encouraging the team to improve in the process. Wherever we are lagging, we keep on improving and also we'll be learning more from that. Learning and improving. This is what we do all the sprints. No one is perfect in implementing the Scrum process. So whatever the complex situations or complex problems will be coming in, we'll try to learn from that and try to improve from that, finding the solutions. So that is what we do here. Second one is during each retrospective, the Scrum team plans ways to increase product quality by improving work processes or adapting the definition of done, if appropriate and not in conflict with product or organizational standards. The Scrum team has to plan for the quality here. So with the done, which I talk about all the time, is nothing but it's a quality that needs to be check marked. If that is check marked, then that is nothing but a done. By the end of the retrospective, the Scrum team should have identified improvements that it will implement in the next sprint. By the end of the retrospective, again, that you guys need to identify the improvements that whatever the improvements you guys identify that to implement in the next sprint. Implementing those improvements in the next sprint is the adaptation to the inspection of the Scrum team itself. So, as I said earlier, it's all about adapting the improvements for the next sprint. So, whatever mistakes we have done, so we are trying to improve from that by not repeating those same mistakes. Although improvements may be implemented at any time, the sprint retrospective provides a formal opportunity to focus on inspection and adaptation. So that's a common thing which we'll be doing. Okay, that's about sprint retrospective, guys. So these are the Scrum events. So we're going to wrap up with the Scrum events here. So this is the last one. Any questions in Scrum events, just let me know. Scrum artifacts represent work. The Scrum artifacts are nothing but the product backlog, which we keep on talking about. The product backlog is who is responsible, is product owner. Is it responsible for the product backlog? We're going to see that refined product backlog as soon as we get done with that, writing the acceptance criteria for every user story. Okay, artifacts defined by Scrum are specifically designed to maximize transparency or key information so that everybody has the same understanding of the artifact. Okay, so the product backlog, what we're going to see is going to be shared among everyone. So everyone has to participate in that event so that everyone has the same knowledge and same understanding on each item, whatever you guys work on. Okay, the product backlog is one of the Scrum artifact, and it's an ordered list of everything that is known to be needed in the product. So we have already seen that the product backlog yesterday, so it's still under construction. And the product owner is responsible for the product backlog, including its content, availability, and ordering. A product backlog is never complete. So the product backlog has no end. There is no dot for the product backlog. The product owner keeps on writing the user stories based on the feedback, whatever it gets from the customers, or based on the feedback, or whatever it gets from the stakeholders, or based on some knowledge shared by the development team or anyone. So he keeps on writing the user stories. He keeps on doing that as a regular routine thing, keep writing the stories. The earliest development of it lays out the initially known and best understood requirements. Product backlog are nothing but the requirements. So it's a requirements from the business, it's a requirement from the customer value. The product backlog evolves as a product, and the environment in which it will be used evolves. The product backlog is dynamic, it constantly changes to identify what the product needs to be appropriate, competitive, and useful. Okay, so you can understand that point. It keeps on changing it. So there is no dot for that product backlog based on the competitive from our oppositions, like other companies. So we keep on improving ourselves, or we keep on implementing that product backlog items. The product backlog lists all the features, functions, requirements, enhancements, and fixes that constitute changes to be made to the product in future releases. So this is what we are still in the construction of the product backlog. So it contains all these features, functions, requirements, enhancements, or any fixes that we need to fix in the game that will be there in the product backlog. Product backlog items have the attributes of a description, order, estimate, and value. These are the attributes that you see in each user story. Okay, you see the user story definition and description under that, and the order of that user story. If it is 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, so you see that order and the estimate. So estimate in the sense that each user story has to be estimated by the development team, which means that how much work, how many days of time, or how much time it will take to complete that work. So that is called an estimate. Okay, and the value. So what is the customer value, or what is the business value out of it? what are we getting out of each user story. The product backlog items often include test descriptions that will prove its completeness when done. All the user stories that needs to be tested at the end, and it has to be integrated with the existing product or existing game. And we call it as done after that, when product owner accepts that user story. Requirements never stop changing, so a product backlog is a living artifact. Changes in business requirements, market conditions, or technology may cause changes in the product backlog. So what are the changes we see is the business requirements, those keep on changing, and the market conditions based on the market conditions also, and the technologies when the tools we change or what is the next upgraded tool we need to use. All these things keep on changing in the product backlog. Multiple Scrum teams often work together on the same product. One product backlog is used to describe the upcoming work on the product. There will be multiple Scrum teams will be working on the same product or like same game. Only one team will be having the one product backlog item, and the other team will be having another product backlog. Product backlog attribute that groups items may then be employed. So as we plan, as we do sprint planning, and then we commit on that. So that is what the last point is. The product backlog refinement is the act of adding detailed estimates and order to items in the product backlog. Is the same thing which we have talked about this earlier. This is an ongoing process in which the product owner and the development team collaborate on the details of the product backlog items. To define this product backlog, the product owner and the development team will be collaborating to define these items. During product backlog refinement, items are reviewed and revised. This is product backlog refinement is another session that we're going to do. This is external session, which will be reviewing the product backlog items like user stories, and we'll be revising it. Refinement usually consumes no more than 10% of the capacity of the development team. Refinement, we'll talk about this capacity planning in the future sessions. So I'll teach you what is point mean, the 10% of the capacity. We'll do only the 10% for each event. So based on that, we'll see that how many hours you'll be working for each sprint. Product backlog items can be updated at any time by the product owner at the product owner's discretion. Product backlog will be updating, as I said earlier, there is no dot. The product owner will be updating the product backlog anytime. So he keeps on adding the stories into that. Higher ordered product backlog items are usually clearer and more detailed than lower ordered ones. So all the high priority items will be very refined and defined based on the lower priority items. More precise estimates are made based on the greater clarity and increased detail, and the lower the order, the less detail. The high priority items can be given the accurate estimation, or I would say appropriate estimation rather than accurate. There is no accuracy here. Based on the clarity, based on the detail, whatever the product owner provides, based on that, you guys will be doing estimations on that. That's about the product backlog. The product backlog items that will occupy the development team for the upcoming sprint are refined so that any one item can reasonably be done within the sprint time box. So you guys will be committing for this work to do and then getting done by the end of the sprint. The product backlog items that can be done by the development team within one sprint are deemed ready for selection in a sprint planning. So whenever we do a refinement session, if everything is clear, having some clarity on that user story, we plan for that, which means that which is ready for the development, okay, in the sprint plan. Product backlog items usually acquire this degree of transparency through the above described refining activities. Product backlog items usually acquire all the product backlog items that shows that transparency describing the refining user stories which are there. That shows how transparent the user stories are. The development team is responsible for all the estimates. As I said earlier, you will be estimating all the user stories in the future sessions. Development team by helping it understand and select trade-offs, but the people who will from the work make the final estimate. So development team will be doing that, the final estimation by doing some trade-offs with the product owner from the product backlog. The another artifact is monitoring the progress towards our goals. So this is one of the artifacts that at any point in time, the total work remaining to reach a goal can be summed up. Total work in the sense the 2 hours. So based on your capacity, we'll be summing up all the total work remaining to reach a goal. So when can we get done? That is a goal of that point. The product owner tracks this total work remaining at least every sprint review. Okay, the product owner will be tracking this total work, whatever it is remaining. So in the sprint review, we'll be saying that whatever it is getting done or whatever it is not getting done. So we'll be tracking all those work related items. The product owner compares this amount with work remaining at previous sprint reviews to assess progress toward completing the project by the desired time for the goal, which means that these activities, so you'll be assessing from the sprint review how much work has been done from the current sprint review. So based on that, you will be deciding when to go for the release. This information is made transparent to all stakeholders. By tracking this, the product owner will be presenting that, sharing that information with all the stakeholders, and also being very transparent. Various projective practices upon trending have been used to forecast progress, like burn downs, burn ups, or cumulative flows. There are some tools like Jira. We can see graphs like Burndown chart, where you can see how much total of work is remaining in the sprint. It shows in the graph. It shows based on the ideal work what we have planned and how much work we need to complete. So there are burn downs and burn ups where you can see it in the graphs. So that will be shown in the Jira tool. The sprint backlog is a set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, plus a plan for delivering product increment and realizing the sprint goal. Generally, in this point, we are clearly mentioning that the product backlog, whatever we commit, whatever we think the stories are ready. So, what we do is we commit that stories for the sprint, which means that we are moving those stories to the sprint backlog. So all the sprint backlog items will be lying in the sprint, and then we'll be sharing that with the team. So we'll be working towards that goal. The sprint backlog is a forecast that the development team about what functionality will be in the next increment and the work needed to deliver that functionality into a done increment. In this backlog, we will be forecasting about what functionality we'll be doing that in the sprint. That will be looking into the sprint goals or sprint objectives. The work needed to deliver the functionality into a done increment. That is where we are going to plan in the sprint planning sessions. The sprint backlog makes visible all the work what the development team identifies as necessary to meet the sprint goal. All the sprint backlog items will clearly display our sprint goal. So whatever we are planning, so that is nothing but a sprint goal or sprint objective. To ensure continuous improvement, it includes at least one high priority process improvement identified in the previous retrospective meeting. So whatever we do in the retrospective meetings, all the improvement items that will be there in the sprint planning as well. So we keep those improvement items in our planning sessions and we make sure that we are following that. This backlog is a plan with enough detail that changes in progress can be understood in the daily Scrum. Sprint backlog is a complete plan that will be following throughout the sprint and also we'll be talking about those sprint backlog items in the daily Scrum meeting every day for 15 minutes. The last one is development team modifies the sprint backlog throughout the sprint and the sprint backlog emerges during the sprint. Development team will be modifying the sprint backlog, like task and everything. So whatever you get done with the task, you'll update that and you keep on moving forward in the sprint by taking the other user stories for the completion. So that is where you're going to do this. As work is performed or completed, the estimated remaining work is updated. Since I said earlier, we keep on updating our task in user stories. So I'll teach you about that in the future sessions. Only the development team can change its sprint backlog during a sprint. Only the development team can change its sprint backlog during every sprint. Okay. The sprint backlog can be negotiated with the product owner again. The sprint backlog is a highly visible, real-time picture of the work and the development team plans to accomplish during the sprint. and it belongs solely to the development team. So this is where we're going to discuss in the sprint planning session that what is the highly visible and real-time picture of the work. So which means that we'll be showing in graphs like burn down chart, burn ups, and also cumulative flow diagrams, something that which will be seen by every stakeholder. Monitoring the sprint progress, it's at any point in a time in a sprint the total work remaining in the sprint backlog can be summed up as we have discussed this earlier. The development team tracks its total work remaining at least for every daily scrum to project the likelihood of achieving the sprint goal. The development team will be tracking the work, whatever it is remaining. So you'll be updating that in your tools. Like we have action plan, so maybe in the future we might have Jira as well. So you'll be updating that. By tracking the remaining work throughout the development team can manage its progress. By tracking the remaining work, whatever we have, so we'll be managing its progress for the sprint. And this is about increment, Scrum artifacts. In the sprint backlog, we talked about increment at the end of the sprint. We'll be showing the integrated game that we are going to demo to the stakeholders. That is all about this increment. The increment is the sum of all product backlog items completed during a sprint and the value of increments of all previous sprints. At the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done, which means it must be in usable condition and meet the Scrum team's definition of done. All the done items will be integrated, and then that is called definition of done. And when product owner approves it, then that is called definition of done. An increment is a body of inspectable done work that supports empiricism at the end of the sprint. Inspecting the work which you have done by demoing that to the product owner and making sure that you're getting that approval from him. The increment is a step toward a vision or a goal. The increment must be in usable condition regardless of whether the product owner decides to release it. So it's a usable condition. It's again incremental model. Scrum is all about the incremental model. We keep on using it in the future sprints as well. Based on that, the product owner will be deciding when we can go for the releases. Let it be version releases or let it be major releases, whatever it is. So the product owner will be deciding that. That's all about that. This is about definition of done. Product backlog item or an increment is described as done. One must understand what done means. Although this vary significantly per Scrum team, members must have shared understanding on what it means for work to be complete to ensure transparency. So based on this, we'll be talking about definition of done by completing the work and by testing that and then getting approval from the product owner. So that is done. This is the definition of done for the Scrum team and is used to assess when work is complete on a product agreement. Based on that, we'll do the next planning. The purpose of each sprint is to deliver increment of potentially releasable functionality that adhere to Scrum team's current definition of done. So to go for release functionality based on the current definition of done. So development teams deliver an increment of product functionality in every sprint. You guys will be delivering that increment by the end of the sprint. This increment is usable, so a product owner may choose to immediately release it. If the definition of done for an increment is part of the conventions, standards, or guidelines of the development organization, all Scrum teams must follow it as a minimum. If done for an increment is not a convention of the development organization, the development team of the Scrum team must define a definition of done appropriate for the product. If there are multiple Scrum teams working on a system or product release, the development teams and all the Scrum teams must mutually define the definition of done. If there are multiple teams that are working on the same product, then we all together have to define the definition of done. Each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly tested, ensuring that all the increments work together. As Scrum teams mature, it is expected that their definitions of done We'll expand to include more stringent criteria for IR. So it's all about the IR quality increment that we'll be doing by the end of the sprint. Going forward, if you guys keep on practicing it, practicing makes more easier for you guys to understand all this. Definitely, we'll start implementing some things from the Scrum. My only request is for everyone to go through this material and we'll try to implement the same thing which is already there. So the only thing is practicing it. So by implementing all those Scrum values and those 3 pillars and looking into the product backlog, guys, Scrum will work like in any industry. Let it be software industry, let it be gaming industry. Every organization is using Agile Scrum. The only thing is we just need commitment from you guys, from all the team members, that implementing this Scrum in the future sessions. Try to join the daily stand-up channel, join in that, and then we'll start practicing one event, one after the other. For now, we're done with the Scrum. I'll keep on mentoring and teaching you guys whenever it is necessary. Going forward, definitely we have to do this every session. Not like this, not teaching the entire Scrum. So some parts of the Scrum. So I'll be teaching that. But however, all the team members have to go through this as a mandatory, I would say, to understand the process. What is the process about?